Okay. All right. I'm going to be your trainer for today. My name is Olu Funsho. I'm Microsoft Technical Trainer. And the topic is going to be around designing identity, governance, and monitor solutions. So as a cloud professional, as a cloud administrator, these are some of the things like fundamentally you want to be accustomed to as you continue your journey. So I'm going to have some materials here. So usually the materials are somewhere here. So if you need access to the documents, let's go to ak.ms slash easy 305. So you want to get a foothold from engineering standpoint, from architecting standpoint for implementing Azure resources. This is
Hey, Olu,
yes, can you hear me?
are you sharing your screen?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Um,
Ca- Can everybody see my screen?
I can see it
Yes, we
now.
can.
Um,
Yeah, I
Nasha,
can
can
see
you,
it.
you can see it or you can't see it?
Yeah,
I can.
I can.
Okay, you can. All right. Is it up?
It's good. It's good, Olu. I can see it.
Oh,
It's good.
okay, okay. Yeah, so if you want to read up more on what we're going to be covering, so you can pull the materials from here, right here. So this is what we are covering. Management groups, identity. Let's see how far we can go. And monitoring Azure resources. Right. So let me post this in the chat for our listeners. There you go. Yeah, so if you want to follow along, just to use that material. Now I'm going to bring up my whiteboard. Since you have the material, there's really not so much to be doing on the PowerPoint slide. So I'm bringing up a whiteboard. And I'm going to have it. All right. So design, let me add that as a topic here. Okay. So this is what we are covering: how to design identity, governance, and monitor solutions. So design is different from implementation. All right. So this is something a typical Azure architect will be involved in, providing design solutions. Looking for my pen, 1 second. It's appeared to now. Pen just disappeared out of focus. Okay, found it. think somebody's trying to join again. All right. Yeah. So there are two dimensions. The first dimension is the implementation side, and then there's the architecture side. All right. So on the implementation side, we talk about the AZ 104. So now, from AZ 104 perspective, what we're trying to do is how to deploy.
So Olu, this would be AZ-104 would be for those infrastructure as a service type engineers, right? Those guys who are going to be deep in Bicep and Terraform,
Yes,
creating cloud infrastructure. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So how to deploy the Azure resources. But
Can
we
I
are
see a show of hands of everyone who's familiar with Terraform and Bicep and CloudFormation? Very cool. Uh, awesome, Nasha. Anybody else?
Could you repeat the
So-
question? You cut off a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are infrastructure as code platforms. The most famous one of them all is Terraform. Terraform is basically Golang, a higher level abstraction of Golang, that allows you to basically create infrastructure not only on premises within your own data center, but also in the cloud. So it's an agnostic deployment platform for creating storage, compute, AI services, for example.
Okay, noted.
Yeah.
I haven't used it before.
Yeah, I would actually recommend that you guys after this session ends, do some research on Terraform, download it, and within your Azure environment, create infrastructure. The reason why this is important is because when you get into the real world, you're not going to go into a UI and create anything. You're basically going to create all your infrastructure from code. That's going to be a major part of your CI/CD pipelines.
all right.
Oh, makes sense. We're actually trying to use Bicep for the hackathon. I haven't used Bicep before, but I figure it's sort of the same concept as Terraform. So, yes.
Very much so. Very much so. Bicep is the Azure construct. So that's a great way to actually be introduced to infrastructure as code.
Okay. All right. Can I continue?
Go for it, Olu. Sorry for taking over your meeting.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with what I was saying here was the AZ-104 heavily engineering side, right? How to engineer the product. And the AZ-305 side is basically, so it is the architect that provides a roadmap. Just look at your construction, right? What does the architect do? Does the design, right? Conceptualize the idea, put it in black and white, put it in purple and pink, and then sends the blueprint. So these guys handles the blueprint. The architects. So send the blueprint to the engineers, and then they will implement whatever has been recommended. So what is governance? Let's look at governance. So governance from Azure perspective is all about implementing controls. All right, controls. So control in this case is providing guidance. Guidance on how Azure resources should be created and all right. So that's a summary. Governance. How should it be created? How should it be managed? What is the frequency of use? Who should have access to it? All right. So provides mechanisms and processes to maintain control over our applications and Azure resources. And we're also going to determine, you know, who will be responsible for handling those control mechanisms. Now, for us to implement control, I have an image here. So for us to implement that control, for this conversation, we're going to talk about Azure policies and implementing tagging. So from identity standpoint, we talk about tenants. All right. So the tenant is where we create our user objects. So we call something Entra ID. All right. So Entra ID was formerly known as, maybe I should put it on the other side. So Entra ID was formerly known as Azure Active Directory. All right. Azure Active Directory. So that was the old name of Entra ID. So the name was changed October 2003, thereabout. So in this Entra ID, there is the on-prem side, there's the cloud side. All right. So in a typical environment, let's say we have an on-prem. So when we say on-prem, we mean a physical location. So for instance, Nasha, perhaps you are joining from the office. So let's assume your office is 600 Kingston Drive. Oops, spelling is that. Kingston Drive. All right. So this is the location. This is the physical location. Now in this physical location, we have our infrastructure. Now there's going to be Azure, or not Azure now, is Entra ID, Microsoft Entra ID. So this is located anywhere, is in the cloud. This is an Azure cloud. This is a physical location. Now, this on-prem physical location is where Nasha is working. And so from identity standpoint, there are what we call identity workloads. So these identity workloads, now you have a domain controller. All right, so this is a server. The domain controller is a server where all the Windows Active Directory components are going to be managed. So that's where you set up your authentication, Hebros, you set up your group policy objects, you set up organization units. All right. What else? So on premises, you still have your applications running. All right. You have your virtual machines, servers, desktops, users, groups. In fact, that's the fundamental component of identity. All about users, groups, devices. Same thing applies in Azure. You have users, you have groups, you have devices. These are identity objects. All right. These users, groups, and devices. Now, in the cloud, you don't need domain controller server. You don't need server to manage your tenant. So this is our tenant. Sometimes I also call it directory. All right. These are enter ID tenants. Now, this tenant is going to come with the account. So if you look at this image here, at the top right here, we have the tenant. And this tenant will come with a default domain name. So xxx dot on Microsoft.com. So just fill in whatever. So usually that initial prefix would be like the email information of the person that created the tenant, the account. So you have an Azure account where you will use to log in into this tenant. You have a username, you have a password. So you log into the Azure account and then you have a tenant waiting for you. So this tenant is a flat structure. Flat structure in the sense that we are not really dealing with all the overhanging components that we have to deal with on premises. So no servers, no organization units, no group policy objects. Just it's a turnkey. Bring your users, bring your devices, bring your groups, and start consuming them. Now, for access, we talk about role-based access control. For access management. For governance, we talk about policies. Of course, we have apps, all right? We have apps. We have the M365 SaaS. And of course, the license you have will determine how far you can go in this environment. So license comes with M365, all kinds of series, E series, G series. There's a premium license, premium 1 and premium 2 license. All right, those are the fundamental types of licenses you need on premise in the cloud. Now, quick question to every one of us, just picking our brains. Do you think it's possible to have a handshake between on premises and the cloud? Is it possible?
What do you mean by handshake?
So, so this is a on-prem environment, right? www.jamaicagovernment.com, those kind of things. So Jamaican government is considering moving to the cloud, having an extension in the cloud. So they need to build the identity infrastructure. So does that mean that if they move to the cloud, then it's over with on-prem or their resources? Do you think they'll still be able to have access to their on-prem resources? Yes or no?
I think that would be a resource that would be needed. So I assume Azure would have it.
Yeah, correct. So somewhere in the middle, we're going to set up, so we used to call it a direct connect. I think it's now ID Connect. So that's the service we will use to synchronize. So a feature of that service is Cloud Sync. So we're going to synchronize the database holding. So the only thing you need from on-premises is the database holding information on users, passwords, permissions. That's it. So the authentication and authorization information will be migrated to the cloud. And subsequently, you can continue to manage the on-prem workloads from the cloud. All right. So these are like fundamentals that we need to note with respect to identity standpoint. Now, let's do something together. What do you understand by authentication and authorization? Just use your basic understanding. I mean, on the surface, you don't need to go deep. On the surface, what comes to mind? Yeah.
I would say authentication is putting in a password, getting access to something. And authorization would be like different roles like admin, user, client, so on.
Right. Authentication, getting access, password. Right. Being able to sign in to an environment. Then you said authorization is what?
Like having different roles like administration, user, they have different access to information.
Right. So this is the analogy. Thank you. We are excellently correct. So this is the analogy I use. So this is my house. All right. So this is my house, and I have a visitor. So my visitor is going to be spending the day with me. So at the door, I have a security camera. I can identify who's at my door. I said this person is once it gets to the door, there's a PIN number it's going to use. So just to mention the PIN number 222. His name is John. Mention your name, identify yourself as John, PIN number 222. Whoever is at the door will buzz you in. So he just authenticated himself. So the person inside has a list of guests, their name and their PIN number. So he said his name is John, PIN number 222. Yeah, we're expecting you. You are welcome. So we have crossed the hurdle of authentication. Now, authorization. You are in my house now, Mr. John. Mr. John, this is my kitchen, right? This is my bathroom. This is my play area, right? So I told Mr. John, if you need lunch, go into my refrigerator, get some pizza. You can use my oven to warm your pizza. So what's going on there? I'm trying to tell Mr. John that welcome to my house. You have the permission to go to my kitchen. You have the permissions to grab pizza from the refrigerator. You have the permissions to use the oven. You have access to all of this. But um, you can't enter my bedroom. So we have a basement. I've locked the door to the basement. Restrictions, permissions, access. So that's what are you authorized to do in my house? All right, that's a comparison. So in your journey as a cloud, as a tech professional, engineer, identity, you're going to deal with access, authentication, and authorization. So we talk about roles and permissions for authorization. So speaking of roles, we have Entra ID roles, and then we have role-based access control. So Entra ID roles is all about is associated with identity objects. Roles we associate with identity objects. For role-based access control, roles we associate with Azure resources. All right.
Makes
So now,
sense.
yeah. So now the roles for objects. So what are these objects? Even though I've mentioned it the other time. So objects include users. Identity objects include users, groups, devices, apps. All right. So apps, you need service principals. Azure resources includes virtual machines, virtual networks, functions, app services, endless. 1,001 resources can come to mind. So these are the fundamentals. Now, the roles that are associated with users might not be the same with groups, with devices, with applications, but there are roles. Now, examples of Entra ID roles. If you don't remember any role today, remember this lady, global admin, global administrator. If you don't remember any role today, remember this guy, user administrator. Global administrator has the keys to the kingdom, just like we used to say. It's got the keys to the kingdom. And what this means is that this is the super user. I don't know how else. I mean, this guy can do and undo. Anybody that creates this tenant, all right, remember the directory, anyone that creates it automatically inherits the global admin role, and he can delegate other roles to other users. So usually it's advised that have like 3 to 5 users, right? So depending on how your environment is configured, for an environment like Microsoft, so might have like 5 across geographic locations, depending on the tenant. So different reasons on how to implement this. The user administrator manages user information. So a user administrator would manage which user is created, which user is added, which permissions does user have. There are a lot of roles here. I'm going to show us very soon. And of course, for Azure resources, the roles include owner. So the owner is the super user. There is the reader. There is a contributor, right? So we have gone from identity to governance. So identity and governance are interwoven, right? They are interwoven. Another thing to note is the fact that identity and governance go hand in hand. So these roles is a first half of governance. Controls. You know, controls make sense now, right? Control, access. From resource standpoint, controls, right? So if you're an owner, what can you do? What can you not do? If you're a reader, what can you do? What can you not do? Now, to drive home the point, let me take you to the portal. Is a good time. If you have any question, please bring it on. Are we clear so far?
Yes, so clear.
All right. So let's go to the tenants. So usually if you log in to your Azure portal, you're gonna log in, you're gonna provide a username and a password. So once you are logged on, you have the account. So this is my account. Now I'm gonna go to Entra. Entra ID. I have all of these users, groups. So remember, Entra ID objects, users, groups, devices. Where's application? Yeah, applications. All right. So these are your, yeah, these are your Entra ID objects. So how many users do I have? 3 groups, 3 applications, 3 devices. So in a real life scenario, in an enterprise environment, you're going to have a whole lot of users, thousands of groups, depending on how large the organization is. If it's a startup, you not really have so much numbers. So for users, best practice, right? If you look at the roles, so these are the roles we're talking about. So we have privileged roles and we have non-privileged roles. So you see these privileged roles, you must guard them with all diligence. You must guard these privileged roles with all diligence, with everything you have, with everything you need. Because in the event of a security breach, the bad actor, the malicious guys, their targets more often than not are people that have these privileged roles because they are administrative roles more often than not. They are performing administrative tasks. So if I have access to the one that owns the keys to the kingdom, I can do and undo. So you don't want the keys to fall into the wrong hands. So the other time I mentioned global administrator, and then where's user administrator? User administrator. So look at user administrator. Manage all aspects of users groups, resetting passwords, limited admins, global administrator. Manage all aspects of Enter ID, resources, services, Enter ID identity. So now to implement the roles, best practice, add your permissions at the group level. Don't add permissions individually. Don't add roles individually. So add assignment, select role, so select members. So you have the option to add users or groups. Why do we say add the permissions at the group level? Because we don't want to clean up after our developers. We don't want to clean up after our engineers. We want to ensure that if a user is no longer part of a group, they don't carry that role as well. So the reason why we implement mapping the permissions at the group level is because the group remains, right? But the objects of the group can change. The users associated with the group can change, and they can inherit other permissions. They can assume other roles. So somebody that is in finance, right? The person started as an IT specialist, but changed roles and became HR, became a finance professional. So as an HR professional, there's nothing, you are not concerned about consumption. You are not concerned about virtual machines, virtual network. So maintaining virtual machines, virtual networks is out of a purview. So we want to make sure that we are not duplicating. We don't have a ticking time bomb in terms of permissions. All right. So that's for the Entra objects. Now let's go to Azure resources. Just pick a resource. Let's pick a virtual machine. So this is a virtual machine here. If I go under access control, then the access management. So you can check your access, check the roles. So those are, remember we talked about owner, contributor, reader. Those are like the top three. Roles are added on a least privileged basis. People should only have access to what they need per time. Roles are added on a least privileged basis. Access to what you need per time. Are we clear? Any question? So you can
Makes
see,
sense, makes sense.
yeah. So depending on the resource, virtual machine, I mean. So for instance, granular access. So I don't want to grant this user full control on my subscription. So I'm going to do this. Let me look at the roles from virtual machine perspective. Virtual machine. So these are the permissions you can add. So usually you get administrator, virtual machine contributor, and some are compute, some are non-compute. So that's for permissions. Now, finally, still talking about governance and identity. The final thought here, we're going to talk about policy. So when you hear of Azure policy is about providing guidance, on how Azure should be created. Should be created, and what else? So policies cuts across different domains. I mean, you have a policy on location, all right? So these policies could be in two phases. There is the definitions, and then there is the initiatives. The policy definition and initiatives. So initiatives are collection of policies. And then definitions are singular policies, standalone policies. All right, standalone definition. So what we're just trying to say is that you want to provide guidance on how our Azure resources will be created. So this is for instance, imagine if you are working for the government of Jamaica. So you are working for the federal government. So that means there will be sovereign cloud requirements. You may not necessarily be in a sovereign cloud, but there might be guidance on how data should be handled, right? How servers should be created, location, where those servers should be when they are created. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to search policy. So this is policy. Come again?
Yes.
I thought that someone was speaking to me. All right. So this is policy. And like I said, we have so the definitions. So we have the policy definition and the initiative definition. So policy definition are individual policies. I'll filter this. So these are individual policies built on top of the controls. These are like controls that needs to be adhered to depending on the resource. So they are customized for resources. This was VM SKUs. So for instance, I can say, in virtual machines, they come in sizes. They come in series. There's the D series, the G series, the B series. So if you only need, if your environment, maybe you're trying to save cost and you don't want people to create other sizes of VM, you can create a policy for that. So in this policy, we want to block all VM SKU sizes or a specific size. So it's going to specify the SKUs. All right. So maybe you have acceptable SKUs. You're going to list them, and then everything will go on and accordingly. Now, initiative definitions. These are group of policies. Right. So initiative definitions, these are group of policies, and they come in collections. So depending on the industry where you work, you operate, regulatory frameworks you adhere to will be considered here. So we have things like FedRAMP, ISO 27001, HIPAA, high trust, PCI DSS for payment cards. So for banking environments, payment platforms, we want to adhere to this. So it's just giving us, based on their recommendations, how our environment. All right. So that's for policy. And you can, regardless of which one, for definitions, for initiatives, you can scope it. All right. So I can give this one. So look for a corresponding policy, add your initiative parameters. So this is a bit complex to configure if you are trying to set it up, but just note those fundamental basics that there's the initiative definition, there's the policy definition. All right. Finally, let's talk about we monitoring. All right. So if we come back to that whiteboard I shared, not the whiteboard, not the image. So you see this entity here, very important. Let me copy it. Let's take this off. So you see, those are roles, those are policies. They all have their areas of concentration. So we said tenant. So there are tenant roles, right? What did we call the tenant roles? Who remembers? What did we call the tenant roles? Anyone? Enter ID roles. So once you get to my groups, roots my group, so we are dealing with Azure resources. All right. So I can add my policy. I can add my role-based access control. I mean, I can add it at the, well, so policy at the my group level, role-based at the subscription level, downward. So wherever I add it, if you add it at the subscription level, it's going to affect all subsequent resource groups, all subsequent resources. If you add it at resource group, it's going to affect all subsequent resources. All right. So you want to pay attention to how you scope your permissions, your roles. Who should be able to spin up a VM? Who should be able to delete a VM? Who should be able to create a storage account? All right. All of those things. All right. So resource tag is just for us to be able to identify our resources that are created. You want to be able to map them, especially from finance standpoint. Oh, how many virtual machines did we create? How much are we paying for those virtual machines? So that's what tagging is about, just giving us that flexibility to be able to, map all auxiliary resources in one place. Somebody's hand is up.
Hi, I have a
Yes, Nyasha.
question.
Yes, please.
Sometimes when I'm trying to organize role-based access or service principles. With my university school account, I get an error. I can't quite remember exactly what the error says, but it kind of gives me a hint that it may have to do with the fact that I'm using a school account. It almost says that I don't have permission to set certain permissions.
Mm-hmm.
For example, for my research group. Have you seen something like that before? And do you know if there's a workaround other than not using my school account?
That means your school account has a lot of policies around it. So there are some things you can do with the account, there are things you can do. So you don't have permissions to, based on the role, you would most likely be a reader. All right. Most likely you don't have an administrator access to perform some administrative tasks. So that's the issue with school access. You can't really go all out unless you have the elevated access to perform your tasks.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Do you know if there's a way to change that, or is it just with all school accounts? I'm not sure if I should be reaching out to my school person, like somebody at UE, to get more access, or if it's just
Yeah.
a limitation.
Yeah, so they don't want, because one thing we didn't talk about is this young lady here. You see this golden lady? This is where
Yes.
this is a dollar. I want to add a dollar sign. So this golden lady is what determines how much is being consumed. So this is the subscription. So now imagine if if you are like 2,000 users in the school, if everyone is able to spin up a VM and then forget to turn it off, spin up high-end database, forget to turn it off. I mean, in 1 week, the school might be recording like $40,000. All right, in costs. So those are the controls. So your inability to perform that task is a control to limit you. Does it make sense now?
Yes, that makes sense. So I'm lacking the control then, essentially.
Yes, essentially.
Okay.
All right. And all right, so design. Let's talk about the design. So since this is architecture component, so I'm going to go to the Azure Architecture Center. For anyone that joined us late into the class, these are what we covered in case you want to read up. So check out the link in the chat. So this is the design center, sorry, the architecture center. So you can look up all kinds of designs. So first, let's look at governance. Let's see if there's anything around governance. Policies for PCI DSS. Payment card industry. I don't know what is obtainable in Jamaica, but this is a component. This is a governance component prevalent here in the US with respect to payment card industries. Where's that image? I was looking for the image. This is what I don't like here. It's hiding the image. So here, so from identity standpoint, so we have our key vaults, our containers, subnets. So we can create policies here, all right, and map it to scope it to the subscription, the resource group. I can't even find that here. Let's do this. Let's do Entra ID. All right, okay. Multiple forest with okay. So this is a typical scenario where we talked about the connect, right? Did you remember Entra ID connect?
Yes.
So let's assume you just joined the university as the solutions architect on the IT team. So they say, oh, we're trying to make it, you know, feasible, realistic. What do we need to migrate from on-prem to the cloud? So what did we say? We said you need this service, Entra Connect, to move from on-prem to the cloud. And that will give you access to the cloud workloads. So you're going to map to a corresponding tenant. So remember I said anything, you can have anything here, .onmicrosoft.com. So this is the on-prem environment. We talked about the domain controller, didn't we? So this is where we have our on-prem identity objects, manage access, talked about apps, talked about the servers, right? Network. So it's not just the Entra, the identity standpoint. So this is Azure, right? A colossal environment of infrastructure. So now, once you get here, you can begin to access your Azure resource. So there are different ways. So we talk about hybrid connections, different ways of connecting to the network in Azure. So there's a gateway service to provide that access. And that gateway service is going to be encrypted, all right, to set up that access. So this design provides high-level guidance on how to start the journey, all right, on how to start the journey to set up your cloud environment. And you can see the subscription. So you can have multiple subscriptions within a tenant, all right, within an account. How many subscriptions? 3. So there's a subscription for the company, there's a subscription for shared services, there's a subscription for another company, all in the same tenant, all in the same tenant. We talked about role-based access control, right? So this is just summarizing many of the things we have talked about. Posting the link in the chat as well. All right, let me see. How are we doing with time? Slightly. Okay, so yeah. So this is where we're gonna, the only thing we didn't cover is the monitoring side. So let me see if I have the monitor. Okay, it's not here. So let me just give a 5 minutes. I know going over the time. So Azure Monitor is the central monitoring platform, the central monitoring system for monitoring Azure workloads. Because all of this infrastructure, if you have them in place, we want to ensure that we have the right solutions to monitor the services. So Azure Monitor comes as logs and metrics. All right. So the logs, let me show you something here. Copy image. So this is Azure Monitor. So you have logs and metrics. So what do we do with the logs? The logs handle events. All right, activity logs. And then the metrics gives us patterns, evaluate patterns. It also gives us a sense of, let me see here, numerical data. And this one, telemetry data. So this Azure Monitor is going to ingest data from all your infrastructure, your applications, your Windows machines, your Linux machines, your virtual machines, virtual network, subscription, even on-prem resources, custom resources. All right. All of them will be sending their activity information to Azure Monitor. And now, once the data gets to Azure Monitor, we can do anything with it. Right? We can leverage insights, which is a feature of Azure Monitor, to evaluate performance, and health status of the corresponding workload. And we can analyze the data using log analytics workspace. Uh, Perhaps want to integrate to third-party tools, so you can integrate as well to ITSM. Is everyone familiar with ITSM? ITSM platforms? Anyone? So ITSM is information technology system management. So for instance, you might have a ticketing platform. Do you have a ticketing platform at the office? So it could be like service desk, service now. All right. And then based on the signals that are being generated, we can, automate response using logic apps, using runbooks to automate response. And another thing we can do with the data that is being ingested is to visualize the data. So you can look at trends, we can look at patterns, you know, as as much as needed. So remember, Azure Monitor is the monitoring component, captures. Now, data comes in different sources, different forms, shapes, and sizes. So your persistent storage is a log analytics workspace. So log analytics workspace, that's a persistent storage. So let me just show us what that looks like, and then we'll wrap this up. So monitor. This is Azure Monitor. This is the activity log. All right. So the activity log provides information on who did what, when was it done, all right, and what was done, who, right, time when it was done, what was the activity that was done. So that is what you get with the activity log. It's a component of Azure Monitor. So we talked about insight, right? Gives us information on the performance, health status of these are Azure infrastructure. Not all Azure resources, but a few of them. Performance health status of those workloads. Then we talked about the log analytics workspace, which is going to be sending those persistent data. The log analytics workspace is the environment where we create tables. Well, for every resource. So if I go into tables, so we're going to see all maybe alerts. All right. So for every resource that is server and everything, they are going to be here. You're going to be seeing them here. You don't have to create the tables. Once a connection is set up, a corresponding table will be created for them. Now for servers, agents, their corresponding agents will be installed. If you want to monitor your Windows machines, you're going to download the log analytics agent for Windows. If it's a Linux machine, you're going to download the log analytics. Log analytics agent is antiquated right now. So what we use now are Azure Monitor agents. Azure log analytics agent is legacy. All right. So we've dwell more on Windows on Azure Monitor agent. So just establish a handshake, provide all this information locally on the device, and then they can connect and begin to export data. All right, I can create an export rule. Then finally, cost. You also want to factor in the cost. So cost depends on the amount of data that is being ingested. So how do you determine which tier is most suitable? The first 30 days, ingest all the logs, all the data sources you need, ingest them. If you, at the end of the month, want to figure, oh, we don't need so much, 200 gig is okay, then stick with 200 gig. You can cap your daily collection of data. We don't want to collect more than 100 gigabytes of data per day, so you can 600 gigabytes per day, whatever it is, so you can use that as daily cap. Retention default is 30. It could vary. This is free. Anything beyond 30 comes at a cost. All right, because you need those additional days. That's why you're requesting for it, so it comes at a cost. All right, so do we have any comments? Final thoughts before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say something on what Masha said with the accounts. There are two separate student subscriptions, a student starter, and then I think it's just Azure for Students is the other one. And Azure for Students allows more functionality, a lot more functionality. So if it's planning to do anything, I would suggest to use that one.
I have the problem with Azure for students actually as well. But I'll see if I can find a workaround for that subscription.
Okay. But both of them don't allow you to add people, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Thank you for adding that. So these are what we covered. Design, identity, governance, and monitor solutions. We talked about governance, we talked about the engineering side of Azure and the design and architecture side of Azure. So our conversation is largely on the architecture side. So as an architect, you do a lot of designs, a lot of map outs, blueprints, just giving you a semblance of that, what that entails in real life. Then we talked about the Entra ID, setting up hybrid connectivity using the ID Connect. We compared authentication and authorization. All right, what is obtainable from on-prem Active Directory, Entra ID. We talked about governance. and controls, which includes policies, role-based access controls, permissions. And of course, we talked about monitoring, right? So I've posted the materials you need if you want to further read up on what you have covered, right? So thank you so much for coming in today.